Welcome, everyone. Marcus, welcome.
Hey,
My
thanks for
name,
having me.
hey, Marcus is going to be the star of the show today. Marcus and I would like to thank you all for joining us this afternoon, morning, whatever time it is from where you're tuning in from. We know it's a busy time of year, but for the next hour, we want to discuss KPIs tracked by high-performing CAS firms. And we might not have everything figured out, but sometimes hearing somebody else's story helps you to craft yours. And so that is the goal of our session today. Marcus and I will be sharing DBA's story, and you glean what you can from it, and then share any suggestions that you have for us. We'll love to take that feedback. So on our agenda today, first off, Marcus Dillon is president owner of Dillon Business Advisors, and I am Amy McCarty, director of operations at DBA. And so the two of us would like to discuss why track KPIs inside of your accounting firm, what KPIs should you be tracking, can take some of the suggestions that we have today, and then sure, it's great you're tracking them. When do you look at them? What are you doing with them? So, Marcus, are you ready for this?
Let's rock and roll. I'm ready. And all that to say, when we start this, like there will be real numbers shown. So please don't pass judgment on us or me individually. That's really what I'm asking for. So, but we know that just showing the numbers, especially to a bunch of accountants, helps add context. So these are going to be real numbers, real DBA numbers, and there's going to be a lot of stories behind those numbers as well. Some we'll dive into today, some we just don't have enough time to dedicate to. So I'm ready for this. Let's go.
All right. Rachel is behind the scenes, and so if you have any questions, feel free to fire those through that questions panel. Rachel's going to monitor them, and then we'll address verbally as they make sense as we go throughout. So it's great that we're talking about KPIs, Marcus, but without having a goal to stand behind, then really they're worthless, right? And so in just a moment, I'm going to take us into kind of a historical view of where DBA has been and then the goals that we have going forward, which will help to paint a visual as Marcus takes us through DBA's numbers and shares those stories. So if we look at just a historical view here, this goes all the way back to 2019, which is not the beginning, but it felt like a good time to start as we're looking at numbers here, because that's right around the time that you were starting to make big shifts, right, Marcus?
Yeah, so 2019, we still had an A&A practice. That was, I think we had done a transaction or two where we started to block and monetize and exit clients. So started to reshape the firm. Along with reshaping the firm and the revenue makeup, we started to reshape the team as well. And obviously a lot of those goals were around the team aspect and, you know, supporting the right team. Who did we feel that we were called to serve both internally and externally with team members and clients, and all the way to where we're at today. And this is our story. This is not, you know, there's going to be firms that are larger than us. There's going to be firms that are smaller than us. There's going to be firms that are way more profitable than us. There's going to be firms that are less profitable. And so that's just all to say, like, once again, please don't judge. We're not doing that to you. We were just here to really help and provide context. So yeah, 2019 to 2024, where we're at today. So yeah, let's go.
All right. Well, you can see that our goals for 2024 are 3 million in gross revenue, which we've been rounding up to 3 million for a while now. So the goal is to actually hit 3 million, since Marcus talks in what is it, future truth is what you call it?
I like to tell the truth in advance. And so you know, some people may call that forecasting. You can use that term however you want. But 3 million, and we'll talk about things that we've already done, things that we've done in the last few weeks to put us on track to 3 million and more in 2024, and then how that's going to set the stage for the rest of DBA's growth.
Yeah. I think one thing I'll point out before we get into these KPIs is the orange, or excuse me, the yellow on your screen, if you see the yellow, is our CAS revenue. And so just the goals over the years have been to grow the CAS practice, and you can see that that is working as anticipated there. So
Yeah, and we'll get into some KPIs that help us determine if we're on track for these goals or not. Obviously, if you're sharing KPIs with your clients and helping them monitor their business, you need to look in the mirror and do the same for you. And that's what we've done here today. Sometimes we look at these KPIs too often, and we'll also kind of go into that and who can help hold you accountable to these metrics and when you should be sharing them. But a lot of times us as firm owners or leaders in a firm, we'll set goals maybe at the beginning of the year or throughout the year, throw them up on a whiteboard and never revisit them or never do things that put us on track to help those goals. They're kind of maybe safe goals. So 3 million for us is a little bit safe, honestly. And that's partly just so I can actually hit what I've been saying for the last few months. But the other piece there is just how do you get others bought into this vision, others bought into these goals, and you're actually monitoring where you're at throughout the year. So those are the goals that we shared with the team. We've talked about that on mine and Rachel's podcast, and everybody within our organization knows these goals, which is another very important thing for us at DBA. We're not trying to hide anything from one level of team member compared that to the leadership team or even the ownership. So these are very transparent across the organization, which helps everybody move in the right direction.
exactly. All right, so why are KPIs important? Marcus, you kind of just summarized that just to keep us on track, but what are we seeing in the industry as it relates to KPIs?
KPI has become a buzzword. A lot of, if you're doing any type of advisory or any type of bookkeeping plus work, you're probably doing KPIs with your clients. And if you're doing that, then it's just the mile markers on the road of business, right? And so that it's what you need to pay attention to, whether or not you need to make adjustments, need to stop what you're doing, go a different direction. These KPIs should be telling you something about the health of the organization and where it's going, and if you're on track to meet those goals that maybe you and others around you did set at the beginning of the year or whenever those were last set. So they are extremely important. We know how important they are for clients. They are probably more important for your own firm than they are for any of your clients, because as a leader, as an owner, your business needs to be healthy for you to serve others. And so I know it sometimes is a hard shift to make whenever you do focus on self as opposed to clients or team members, but you have to make sure your organization is healthy. And this is part of how we do that at DBA.
Exactly. I mean, tracking KPIs and reviewing them and getting comfortable doing that makes it easier for you to get comfortable with your clients and helping your clients to do that. So
yeah, and it's that much easier to have these conversations with clients if you're doing them yourself, and it's just like using QBO, for example, in the firm. If you know QBO and you're doing things for your own firm in it, you're going to be able to talk to your clients' experience with QBO a little bit better. And that's just one example. So KPIs are no different. If you know how to do this and how to dissect it for your own firm and what these KPIs are telling you, it's a lot easier to have that conversation with others when it's their numbers.
You're being an advisor to your own firm, right? So, all right, well, let's start. We've just grouped the KPIs into 2 buckets. We have looking inward, where you will be comparing yourself to yourself, right? In an effort to just gradually get better is ultimately what we're after there, because the comparison is the thief of joy, right? Like that's a quote that's out there. So all we're doing is we're trying to continue to advance ourselves. And then our other bucket will be looking outward, comparing to what the industry standards are that exist out there. So our first 2 KPIs looking inward are current gross revenue and prior gross. So Marcus, why are we looking at these numbers?
I mean, top line revenue, right? That's what makes the world go round. Other than cash, that's your primary success metric. And most of us look at this current year versus prior and want to see growth. Unless something has happened in the organization, you've sold off service lines or business, and you can explain that. I think when we look at a P&L for our clients, we always want growth, right? On the revenue side, that's going to fuel the budget for expenses, or profitability is what we would hope for as well. So these two metrics, they're not earth shattering, right? Everybody should be looking at them. And the one kind of thing that I would say is we look at these, and it's been a shift. We look at these on a rolling 12. And so just like you probably should for your clients, a rolling 12 is probably a more accurate picture of their year than a calendar year. And CPA firms, especially with the seasonality that is in some firms with tax season and different projects, looking at it 12 months at a time versus calendar year has really helped reframe how we look at DBA and where we're at today versus something that we invoice for maybe 14 or 15 months ago. That person may not even exist in our client roster any longer.
Yeah, it's more realistic, more relevant, more real time, right?
Yep.
And then you're not waiting for a specified time to look at it.
Yeah, so this is a big shift for accountants. And I'm right there along with you as a practitioner. So it's we like the calendar year stuff, but we've got to roll 12 months at a time. So it's a big shift.
When did you start looking at it over a 12-month rolling? Do you remember?
It was probably, well, I would say about 2020, as we started to like really evaluate if the changes we were making sense. When we were starting to exit service lines and clients, we had to look at it different. And that was the same time that I started looking at our firm as a business, which most other people have problem doing and say they would like to. But there is that shift whenever you can set aside client work as a practitioner, as a billable entity, and look at your own business, which needs to be healthy.
All right, so we're going to look at DBA's numbers. Are you ready for that?
Yeah, and these are probably shared, and 2.82, that's rounding to 3. So give me a little bit of credit.
We're already there. We've already
Yeah,
hit the goal.
So 2822, 2673. So that's where we were. And I love the fact that these numbers are out there. You can't argue with data, right? And even when we're advising our clients, data is black and white. Most accountants are black and white, and that's why we love them, right? And so you can bring emotion, you can bring drama into anything, and that's what we have to do, right? Because we have the black and the white there, the two different numbers. And so we have to tell the story around those two numbers. And even though there was an increase, we did some crazy stuff in the background that we have to talk through, and that is we exited clients from the base of DBA. So during this year, so rolling 12, this is actually 3/1/23 to 2/29/24. And while I would love that the leap year extra day gave me a little bit of revenue, it didn't do much, but there was exits within there. So in 2022, we actually sold off $160,000 worth of revenue to another firm. And then last year we sold another block of 75. So we can't count on that revenue being the same year over year. We've got to do some different things. And so if you'll go to the next slide, this is how we actually look at it and what makes up those revenue. So this is our QBO. I don't let too many people in our QBO because I don't want them to judge me on how good of a bookkeeper I might be either. So this is how we lay out our revenue, and you'll see pretty standard, like we've got a discount there that we're tracking if we give some people below market items. We've got the accounting services, which is what we would call CAS, which we're focused on growing. We've got consulting income, so that was a lot of the PPP stuff, the ERC. We didn't do much of it, but we did a little. And then we'll also have like where we do outside of scope audit assistance, just different things, maybe an M&A project, due diligence, things like that are in that consulting block. Tax prep, pretty cut and dry. That's a non-CAS client that we do tax prep for. And so even that is where we've seen decrease because we're not focused on annual tax relationships any longer. We still have quite a bit of revenue there, and that's made up of 12 to 15 families that we serve evenly throughout the year. It used to be more, and those clients are the ones that we continue to grade and then exit from the firm. So you will see a little bit less revenue there on the tax side. And then audit protection, that's going away for the most part because we include audit protection in our CAS service line. So separate audit protection on 1040 work is just going to go away for the most part. And we're okay with that.
So when you look at the increase, 5.56% over the previous rolling period, right? Like initially it doesn't feel so good until you dig deeper into this. And then you have the story behind it and you see that your overarching goal of growing CAS revenue is actually up. I'm gonna round like you, Marcus, 20%, you know?
Hey, thanks for that. So a few different talking points here, and we're going through DBA, but hopefully you can do this with your own, right? And that you can develop the story and share that with somebody else, whoever your accountability person is. Maybe it's a partner, a spouse, another leader within your firm. So CAS did increase by about $300,000. That's another round that I'm giving myself. We did not do any price increases in this time period. So that's the other thing to point out, which we'll talk about later, because we just went through price increases. So we did not do any price increases. That was all new growth. That wasn't any additional price increase built into that. From the consulting side, ERC, PPP kind of phased out. You know, that's just, it is what it is. And then tax prep, we actually had a 10% price increase here because that was kind of weeding out people that we no longer needed to serve, that we don't want to have the hard conversation with, but increasing their price. So we did do 10% last year. This year, it's only 5% on those tax families. But still, that's a little bit of that story when we're evaluating these numbers, that we did increase price and we did exit about 150,000 if we were looking at this year to year. So, you know, net 110,000 is kind of where we kind of recovered from through price recoveries. We didn't add any new clients in that line item either. So, and then the other piece, you know, that's just going away, the less 1040s that we do with that kicker.
Yeah. So up in revenue, less clients, some price increases, but we're about to share some other things that we've just done recently, as you mentioned there, Marcus.
So when you're looking at your firm, it helps to have a baseline. Just to kind of recap, use the rolling 12 months, and that's, you know, that's how we do it, and that's how we would recommend that you do it.
Yeah. I think a good question maybe we address right now, if you we have time, we make time for whatever we want, but why only 5% increase where many firms are at 15 plus? I think you kind of answered that, Marcus, just in what has been happening within the firm, and that's no new clients. It's actually exiting clients and still having a 5% increase. So
yeah.
All right, let's talk about these 3 KPIs, just all from a monthly recurring revenue standpoint, right? As we're talking about CAS firms. So monthly recurring revenue is exactly what it sounds like, right? Why are we tracking that, Marcus?
Yeah, because we want the cash flow that comes with monthly recurring revenue. We want a stable source of cash coming into the business, being the lifeblood of the business. You know, the best part about being a seasonal firm was April and May deposits. That was it, right? Nothing else went with that. I would love the deposits that went along with that hard work. And then because you got those deposits, you forgot how bad tax season was. And so it was like that delayed the reason to change, because it's like you're sitting fat and you've got cash, and that cash burns the rest of the year. But still, that's something to talk through. So it was quite a shift. And so our goal for MRR was always, let's get enough to kind of offset at least one payroll. And then we went from one payroll to let's offset payroll for the month. And then it was, okay, what overhead can we offset with MRR? Rent, whatever else we had that was a fixed cost. And then anything else above that was, you know, starting to be into the profit for that MRR. So total MRR is how we view that, and we'll share, our numbers here in a bit. We also look at the health and the makeup of that MRR. So obviously, how many clients make up that MRR? We are not called to serve a lot of clients. DBA is not. And so even me individually, I can't handle that many relationships. And so you go back to the 150 rule, and it's been talked about a lot. We believe in it. But so we always wanted to maintain that we were a healthy, growing organization serving the people that we were called to serve. And so kind of going back to that overall theme of 2024, give your best to your best. It just kind of shows like, hey, we're not trying to grow to that person's point, 15 or 16%. That would be easy, but we'd have to bring on new clients. Maybe some of those clients aren't the quality that we would want, and we don't want to sacrifice, especially in the midst of a shift of some other business changes that we were making. So, and then that last KPI is average of those. So it's real easy. You all can hopefully do math, even though you may be burned out from like doing too many tax returns where you've got UltraTax calculating it for you, but it's just your total MRR divided by regular, the number of clients. That gives us our average. And so we want that trending up because we want higher value clients. We want to continue serving clients at a higher multiple. And as we've shifted and moved price points up, which are all on our website, we wanted to move some of those legacy clients who we started out below $1,000 and, kind of helped out, and they helped us out as we were kind of getting our feet under us. But now that we're fully running with CAS, we need to either bring them up to market, just like all of our other clients, or refer them on to someone that can serve them best.
And we want to be able to dig deeper with clients, right? So, I mean, that kind of speaks to that, is we're not trying to extend our reach, we're trying to extend our depth inside
Correct.
of our clients.
So here
our
we go
numbers,
with the numbers, right?
Yeah.
All right, so we went from about 147 to 161. And that's just straight CAS MRR. That does not include, we have another service offering called AIM. It's for individual clients. We're actually phasing that out, and we've called it sold out for a few years, but that's another story for another day on why we don't believe in that service model. 1040 plus is what some people call it. Ultimately, at the end of the day, you're just building another 1040 practice that you have to do something with, is what we saw. So this is all CAS. And so number of active MRR clients, we actually saw a decrease. And then average fee, we went from 1822 to 2118, right? So, which our base starting point for our premier package is $2,000 now. So our average is now above what that starting point on our website is. So,
which this all stems, these stats right here, these KPIs all stem from the recent price increase that we went through internally. So
yep.
Let's share a little bit about that with our attendees today.
Yeah, so we increased price. We hadn't done it in 22 months, which I would not recommend. So we did not take our own medicine when it came to the advice we were giving other firms and other clients about price increase, price increase, price increase. We waited too long. And so we just did this in February, pulled all the data, rolled it out. February 15th, updated pricing increase went to clients, getting them onto our new packages that are on our website so that they could see the market value of that package. We calculated everything we do for them. And for some clients, we actually put a loyalty discount to actually not jump them up over time. We had price increases anywhere from 5% to 130%. And the 130% still a client. We're going to charge him April 1st. And so that's everything that we've done. And so with the decrease, which the number of active MRR clients, why is there a decrease? Isn't that bad? What we saw is some of the clients who were below $1,000 churned out. And it was just kind of natural. We no longer had the team, which most of you know, we serve each client with a team of 3, so a CSM, a client controller, and a CFO. You have to have more than $1,000 budget to serve a client really, really well with 3 people. So that's something that we had to work through, and we were no longer really a fit for that client. So of those 5 clients that churned out, two actually rolled into one. They did some reorganization, so that two, you got to give it back to me. I'm not too off there, but we did lose three other clients. So two of those were below 1,000 and just no longer a good revenue fit. And then the other one was more of a personality conflict. So we were a little bit aggressive on price just because we needed to be. And it's one of those clients that you could take or leave. And so it was one of those that actually did choose to transition. And we wish them all the best. And in that situation, there was some things that we were giving them advice. They weren't taking our advice, and it may come to a head in the future, but we're not going to be there to clean up the mess. So it's one of those pieces where it was just a good time for that exit. So everything else we had, I think overall total 9% was the ending increase in MRR. If we go from 147,650 to 160, y'all might have to check my math on that, but 9%, and then we had 96% acceptance rate across the board on all of the price increases, including some at 130%. So all that to say, like, we went into it very mindful of where people were. We brought them up to what they needed to be. And then this actually helps us build the base to grow on. So it kind of gets things right from a team perspective. We know that there's still maybe a little bit of churn here or there. People sell businesses, people go out of businesses, but we feel really solid where this gets us to add those 12 to 18 new clients and build back at $2,000 plus per month.
Basically have cleaned inside the house, right? Like, we've cleaned the house, it's nice and clean, it's now ready.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit about this when we dive into some other KPIs, but we actually have capacity. We have team members, multiple team members right now that are looking for work today, which hopefully you're in that situation too, but just know the accounting industry is usually not that way. So we did this with capacity in mind, and the DBA team appreciates that. And so, like, that's just part of the other reason why we do things like this.
I have one other question for you before we move to the next KPIs. And this is just when we were going through these price increases and we made it through sending out the letters and we heard positive things back from clients, right?
Yep.
You made a comment that this was the perfect time of year to do price increases. Could you share with us all on how you came to that conclusion?
I mean, come on, guys, you're going to be stressed out this time of year anyway, so might as well just all shove it in to the first quarter. So, I used to do this a couple reiterations back, like in the end of the year, and make it effective for January 1st. That is not stress I wanted in my life during the holidays. And so I wanted to make it to where our CAS clients, we include the tax returns in those engagements. So if we are going up effective April 1st, we're more than likely done with their return. So it's a good break. Nobody's asking for us to continue doing their tax. They did, and we said we do not do tax outside of CAS. So we actually refer them on to another firm. But it's a good break. So we did that effective April 1st, one for, just to make sure that we can exit them really well, that we're wrapping up the year, and that, that they can go be served. And so that was kind of our reasoning behind it, those 2 points.
That's perfect. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
All right, so let's jump to the next two KPIs that we have here. We have EBITDA percentage of gross revenue, which I feel like we hear more often now, but maybe not previously, and then our production hours of partners. So talk us through why these are important.
EBITDA, I mean, guys, you can fool yourself all day that your firm is worth some multiple of your top line revenue. But if I've got a really efficient firm that is cranking out really good EBITDA, it's going to be based on EBITDA, not a top line revenue multiple. So succession planning, you've got PE coming in and evaluating firms and buying firms. Firms that are 2 million and below may still be valued based on some factor of your top line revenue and the makeup of your client list. Anything beyond 2 million, we've seen that it's based on some multiple of EBITDA or seller's discretionary earnings, SDE. So those are the things that we as firms need to adjust to and shift. I mean, all of our clients' businesses are based on some multiple of EBITDA. and it's the true, it's the profit. It's what actually is happening. So for you to not evaluate your EBITDA percentage or your net profit percentage and just kind of fool yourself, it's time to get over that. Production hours per partner. Obviously, if you're still working in the firm as a production unit, you're not going to get paid on the other end of that by another firm unless you go work in that firm. So it's something to think about. I've evaluated firms for sale. I've looked at, different options with our firm. If you're doing 1,600 to 2,000 hours a year of production time, that is something that we really need to address and work down. Or, like I said, you're going to have to go work for whoever you ultimately sell to, whether it's an internal or external sale, because the new buyers of these firms and of these client blocks, they're not going to have the partner doing that. They're actually going to have to go out and get 1 or 2 people to do that work that you hung on to for too long, let's be honest. So I think you working yourself out of production and actually monitoring your production hours as we go is crucial to the value of your business and the success of any succession event.
Yeah, like just the delegation of work, right? I mean, the whole purpose of CAS practice is because you can delegate down to additional team members.
Yeah.
All right, well, there's a good story here with our numbers that.
Yeah, there's always a good story, right? So, and we pulled this back, like Amy and I were preparing for this, and we went back to like 2016, whenever I was younger. I don't know how young I was, but I was probably in my 20s, and I still had a lot of energy left, and I could do a lot of work. I could do a lot of production. So back then, our EBITDA was like 50%, not including my production time, which is not sustainable. And it's one of those things. I didn't want to stay at 50% EBITDA. That was not the life that we wanted to live, and the family, dynamic that we wanted for ourselves, for Rachel and me, but also for our team members. I didn't want to drive that. So we started to make changes. And so many of y'all probably, hopefully know me personally and know some of the experiments we've done in the last 24 to 36 months around sales team and marketing and what we bring in-house versus what we don't bring in-house. Some of you also may know my story, and I was a little bit distracted the last 12 to 24 months outside of DBA. And so that all kind of has to go into the story of I was okay taking a little bit less EBITDA, a little bit pay, because I could elevate others. Hopefully I was elevating the right people and then build something. And so part of that was just a season, right? And so we were putting things in place. We did a big conversion of our CRM. So that money we're now seeing ROI on, and we've built that out. That was a 6-figure investment that just straight comes out of EBITDA, or you have to go take down a loan or bring on a partner to do things like that. So a lot of that is recouping that. And then also, many of you know that we went a different direction with the internal sales and marketing team that we were building because the results just weren't there. And for us to be able to continue to cover that overhead, we would have to grow at a pace that we did not want to grow. And so all of that to say, it kind of goes hand in hand with the production hours that I saw for myself. Rachel by default is an owner of DBA because Texas is common law. But she's not a production, she's not involved in that aspect. So I'm the only production partner at this point. And my time did decrease all the way to 156. And what I would say is if you're on that trend, if you go below 200 or maybe even 300 billable hours, you need to remove yourself from production altogether because it's so hard to stay in it and stay relevant. And there were a ton of tax law changes in the last 36 months that I kind of skated by, and really, I'm already in the gray a lot. And so it's one of those where if you're planning to kind of exit, and this for me was that, you just need to fully exit and turn over production to somebody else.
What's your goal for production hours for 2024?
Yeah, so we've had some internal transitions. We actually, our full-time tax director that was in-house, he's no longer here. He went out and started his own firm. So for 2024, my production, which I'm good with, is going to be around 400 hours is my goal. So kind of rolling up the sleeves. I still lead a pod. I'm still a client CFO. And with that, I've kind of helped a little bit more on the tax side this year. We do have somebody in place to kind of be a technical expert on our team who we outsource that knowledge. And she's kind of our tax director of counsel. And so we were able to kind of balance it out. And I knew that 400 hours felt good for me. And I'm going to get that back on EBITDA as well.
So lessons learned here to share would be that, like, you just learned the hard way that dipping too low can open up your eyes to where maybe you don't want to be sitting in.
Well, and that's the piece where it all kind of has to make sense. So for us, we were building in that season, and we were doing things internally to kind of build out infrastructure, build the scaffolding, so to speak. At that time, we had to monitor ROI on those investments. And whenever we started to see ROI dipping, we had to make a choice. Were we going to continue to fuel investment, or were we good enough? And I think that's just the call that we made. Everybody else's risk tolerance may be different on that, but it's ultimately what we went for our team, our clients, and the future of our business.
Yeah, but you can see, I mean, the numbers there paint that story or support that story, right? Like EBITDA bounced back up when you made the choice.
We corrected, very quickly because most of that was payroll expense. And I lied to myself, or I would give excuses because I was out of production as much as I could be, that it was what was necessary. And whenever you monitor it, even though I had this like on my dashboard and I was reviewing it, I was still waiting too long to make some of those hard decisions. And I hurt people in the process. I'll openly say that because you're dealing with humans and that sucks. But at the same time, it wasn't working. So I would say one thing that I've learned in this is if you review KPIs timely, and if you make decisions based on those KPIs timely, you're going to avoid some of that pain that may come on the other side.
Have you, just staying on that for a second here, have you set deadlines for when, if you see a dip in a KPI or you see a change in a trend that you aren't anticipating, do you have a deadline in place for if it doesn't revert or change direction that you're then going to make that decision sooner? Will you come to that?
So we'll get to this in a bit, but I think quarterly is a good rhythm. Even if you think about the KPIs that you share with your clients, quarterly kind of provides a time for you to check. One KPI that's not on here is cash, right? So if you run out of cash, you got to do something. Like, where's that going to come from? And so, for us, it was during that season when payroll was more than it needed to be. We were transferring money from our, profit first savings account into operating to cover payroll. And you can only do that too many times before you're like, okay, I'm a smart accountant, for the most part, probably not compared to the room that we have today, but something's wrong. What would I tell a client in this situation? And so that's whenever you start, peeling back the onion and seeing what's really going on and what needs to change.
Yeah. All right. So those were all
3 months, a quarter, but then every 2 weeks when payroll is due is a great reminder of when things are going not as well as they could. So
yeah. Okay. So maybe not. So quarterly is good to look at it unless there's something glaringly obvious, then the frequency increases and the nudging that you feel internally, right? Like something's not right here.
Yeah, and I would recommend having an accountability partner, somebody that you can really share things with. Maybe that's a partner, maybe that's a spouse, but definitely having somebody that you can go to and that holds you accountable to a timeline.
Right. And also helps you when you're telling yourself, when you're making up stories for yourself, right? When you're lying to yourself, as you said. Yeah.
Yeah, a guy, I follow Andy Stanley, who's a pastor and podcast, and the easiest person to sell is yourself. And what lies do you tell yourself on, hey, it's going to be okay, next week's a new week, and all this stuff. So I'm no different than everybody else. It was just a different type of lie.
Yeah. All right, those were looking inward. So we were comparing ourselves to ourselves, looking at past years, plural or singular, however you want to look at it. Now let's just talk about looking outward and some of the KPIs, just comparing to industry standards here. So the first two on our list are revenue per full-time employee, full-time equivalent, and then revenue over production hours.
Mhm.
So pretty self-explanatory. I mean, we have some goals for the industry there, but what would you add just as what you're looking at, Marcus, when you look at these numbers or decisions you're making?
Yeah, most everybody here is staying in tune with everything that's happening in our industry. So metrics like this are getting talked about openly. If you listen to Alan Colton or anybody else that's involved, and maybe you have no desire to do that, to sell your firm or to have a succession event, but this is a good benchmark to see how you are when you compare yourself to others, right? So we've talked about looking in the mirror and inward, but this is outward, and these metrics are starting to become more and more available. So the piece there is revenue per FTE. It's pretty easy to calculate. You've already got your gross revenue for the rolling 12 months. You can calculate your FTE headcount regardless if you track time in your firm or not. It should be pretty quick to figure that out. And a lot of these KPIs are without the fact of billing, right? Of tracking your time hourly. So I'm still good?
Yeah, you're still good. Your lights went out. Did you lose power?
Power, Texas, we'll just leave it at that. So there's a
All right.
storm happening here, so we're booting back up. It's all good.
Okay. You're good.
Okay. We're on generator power if anybody's following along at home now. So it's fun days. But what I would say is these are easy to calculate KPIs regardless if you track your time hourly and you're doing hourly billing. So that's what we wanted to do. That's what we wanted to share today because we know firms are starting to think about things differently. And so the revenue per production hours, that one you may have to pull a little bit differently if you're not tracking time in the way that we've talked about, the production hours per partner, that as well. So, but we do know that this is openly being talked about now in the M&A circles around accounting firms.
Yeah, I mean, this just supports also, tracking time is like a necessary evil. Although, there are firms obviously successfully working without tracking time, but it's a data point that we readily have available to us. And one day
Especially
maybe
when
we'll
you're
be here.
comparing yourself to others. I mean, that's what these KPIs are about. So, yeah, I would say these KPIs that we're presenting today aren't all the KPIs, right, that you could be reviewing. There's plenty more, and there's plenty that people are talking about and have, but these are what we've reviewed, and that's what we feel called to speak on today. And, these for us are good, so these, I'm
Yeah.
happy with these, right? So when you pulled them, I'm like, yeah, that's really good. So.
Well, yeah, speaking of that, sharing both of those there with everyone, I would say, being over 200,000 revenue, doing pretty well.
Yeah,
Same.
and DBA, where we were when we, 24 months back, 13 months back, we were, over as far as team members. We were about what, 12 plus
Yep.
FTEs, right?
Yeah,
And now we're at 8-ish.
like 9.5-ish.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
down about 3.
Okay. Which the math works out, right? So 295, you're going to give me that 300,000. We're going to round up there. So doing pretty well. And that's just, if you think about the FTE equivalent, like how much book is somebody carrying? Because if I go to my old school CPA firm days, like what's your book? Like how much do you manage? Different things like that. That's the average for our FTEs. And some of those are non-production FTEs that are in that headcount too. So, but that's something to monitor. That's something that's being talked about. And when you're reviewing this for yourself, it's good just to pull it as a baseline and then see where you're at as we continue to operate these firms.
Yeah, exactly. You need the base point or the starting point. All right, let's
Yep.
jump into the next two, which is labor and then technology. Looking at both of these as a percentage of gross revenue. And so these I feel go hand in hand just as shifts towards more technology, there's more available out there. There's more that we can purchase and use, and
Yeah.
but then also just the struggle with labor as well. So what are your
Well,
thoughts here?
I think, we put there less than 50% labor, and how you define labor, we want to make sure that we're including everything in labor, right? So not just wages, we want to make sure we've got benefits, we've got outsourced, if we're doing some contractors, with those are included, we're including benefits, everything, to what it costs us to employ that person. So what I would say is an acceptable range is 50 or less, and what we're seeing today in the market is 25 to 50, because you've got some firms that can outsource a lot and they're on that lower end. And so 25 to 50 is that range. And then on the technology side, what we're seeing is 8 to 12. And if you're below that, if I'm evaluating a firm for sale and they're at a 2% technology cost, I can gather what that firm looks like. There's a lot of paper in that firm, and there's probably a server in the closet, and they're running ACS, UltraTax, and probably some, manual green sheet work papers. So you can't get by in today's world with 2% technology cost. So 8 to 12% is where we would expect to see it. If you're at 15 or 20%, maybe you're doing something amazing and building out bots that go through and, do the tax return for you. But I would expect if you're operating at that, your labor is probably closer to that 25 number. So that's where you start to evaluate, what does your firm look like to an outsider? And that's no different. So when we start to look at these, as far as like when DBA is concerned in our results, we've improved over the last year, as mentioned, because our headcount got, right sized. It got back in line with where we needed to be based on our revenue goals and our new growth goals. So 35.14%. We've also started, bringing in a little bit of outsource to kind of help support our pod structure, and that's been great. That'll continue to trend down. Not saying we are seeking less opportunities for W-2 employees, but it's just the availability of help. So 35.14%, and that's right in line with, that old school, putting my, old hat on, where it was a third, and it would be labor was a third of your top line revenue. We're right there, and I think we're really good to our people. So we include their benefits, profit sharing, all the good stuff to achieve that 35%. And then on the technology side, 9%, which that is something when we look at goals and like the EBITDA and things like that, I think we spend too much on technology. We spend too much on technology we don't use fully, and we pay too much for a service that doesn't fit where we're at. So technology is always something that we're evaluating, how we can get that lower, or how does that impact, more uptime, decreased labor costs. So that's where we're at, 9% and 35, I'm okay with, because when I look externally at other firms and see 8 to 12 or up to 50, that, I know we're on the right track.
Right. You can feel better about what the numbers look like, even though there's still room to continually improve internally on the team that we have and our technology that we're using. Yeah, those are good to go hand in hand. I agree, right? If one's higher, then the other one's likely lower, and they play together.
And these are most likely the two biggest expenses in your firm, especially as firms have gone remote or consider rent as a different makeup. DBA still has rent because we have the office building, but we're evaluating that and what that looks like in the future to minimize footprint and fully be remote from all aspects. And those two items, payroll or labor and technology, will be the two biggest line items. So those are the ones you got to pay attention to. Don't go try to cut costs and dues and subscriptions and avoid having the hard conversation at labor and technology.
I'll give you opportunity at the end of our session, so you can be chewing on this, Marcus, to just share like biggest takeaway or the thing you would share with your past self that you've learned with all of these. So chew on that one. Don't answer it yet, but all right. Our last KPI and this isn't looking outward, right, is our MRR as a percentage of gross revenue. And so why are we tracking this, Marcus?
Yeah, we're invested in CAS. And so CAS is MRR. I don't know how you do CAS on an hourly basis. I know some firms do, some large firms send an hourly invoice for CAS. And I'm like, you got half of it right, right? So it's like, how do we do this? And because we're focused in it, and CAS for me, like whenever I started to change things and went from being the biggest production asset in the firm and 50% EBITDA and all that good stuff, CAS allows us to delegate work and to build something that is beyond any one person, including the owner. So for us, we wanted to lean into that. And to this point, this whole webinar, like these are DBA's numbers, so hopefully they help add context. But this may not be what you want to achieve in your firm. Maybe your firm looks completely different than trying to achieve, majority MRR as a percentage of gross revenue. If MRR is something you focus on, that also increases the multiple of your firm. So just something to think about there. Annual one-time projects or, consulting projects that don't have recurring revenue are valued less differently if you ever do go to market for an exit, both internal or external exit. So the other thing to mention is some firms want different types of revenue. So we want CAS, we want a little bit of tax because not many people say it, but the profit margins on tax are too good, right? But the right amount of tax is what matters. And who can do that tax? Because if you're 100% tax, like your profit margins are good, but you're always looking for team members. And the tax law keeps changing. So for us, we always wanted to keep a little bit of tax, and most of those families that we serve in that manner are extensions. They served evenly throughout the year with almost a pod-like structure. So for us, it's good. It works right now. But maybe in your firm, you're trying to build out some, financial services income or some other type of ancillary service to go alongside with. And that's not to say like your numbers should be the same as our numbers. Like, so evaluate your firm based on another firm's makeup that you want to look like.
So ours is 68%, but way back when this became a focus, the goal was 33% of total.
Yeah.
Is that an accurate statement?
I think it started as like 10%, then 15, then 20, and then you just gradually, you eat the elephant one bite at a time. So we're at 68%, which, if we're running a 35% EBITDA, it covers everything, right? So that's where it kind of helps us sleep at night. It helps us make better decisions in life that we're not so worried about where's that going to come in. We've got to make payroll or anything. So for us, that was healthy. That was what we always wanted to achieve, was kind of 2/3 or more. And we've seen that increase just because of some of the dials that we're continuing to make as we shift away from annual and as we embrace MRR. That could be 70, 75%. I know some firms do 100%, and like that's great. But it's just for us, it'll take a while, or we'll have to make some even harder decisions to get to that 100% mark.
Yeah, I think I really appreciate that you just said turning the dials, like continuing to turn, right? Because this is not, as is anything in life and in business, we can't just set it and forget it, right? It's a set it, evaluate it on a recurring basis, and tweak as necessary to help the trajectory that you're headed and where you want to be going.
Yeah, and the goal there is trending up. I don't know any firm that wants less MRR. If you're out there, please let us know. Prove us wrong, but everybody wants MRR because they know how good it is.
Yep. It just kind of makes planning and everything a little bit easier. So you've already talked or mentioned it multiple times, right? When should we be looking at these KPIs? And so I think the key points, if you want to add anything else here, is at least quarterly looking at this. You can look at it more frequently. Marcus has shared that he looks at it probably, every other day, maybe every day. I don't know. But
the first 30 minutes of my day, I'm just kind of like blank staring at my screen, wondering different things. So if you really want to know what goes on in my mind, but reviewing these KPIs every 3 months at a minimum, maybe you're working through something. I should have been reviewing our KPIs when I was investing hundreds of thousands of dollars into a marketing and sales teams. I should have been reviewing them faster and more frequently than I was. And part of that was just I was my own accountability. It's just scary a lot of times. But then also I thought we were on the right track. I had, different things that needed to come to light, and that's where we were. So 3 months is a really good stable, and that's whenever you bring somebody else into that conversation, and you share with them. So.
And Rachel is your accountability partner that you're sharing with, right? Every 3 months.
Yeah, Rachel does her best to try to keep me in line. She does a really good job, better than anybody else, but we'll just say she has her work cut out for her.
All right, well, we all know the saying, what gets measured gets managed, right? Which is the purpose of tracking these KPIs or similar KPIs, as we've mentioned today, right? These aren't the end all be all. These are just suggestions and what has worked for DBA. So just to kind of recap, right, I showed this slide in the beginning, but this is really just painting that visual of the trajectory that DBA has been on to grow CAS and monthly recurring revenue to be 68% of gross. And you can see that will continue to trend upwards as we hit our 2024 goals. And we live into the future truth that Marcus has been talking about.
Hey, with the new price increases, we're there. It's like you can ring the bell and we're there. We just got to go do the work now. So that's just
get it done.
Scary sometimes, but yeah, we're on track. And that's the piece where the 12 to 18 new clients. So we've always talked about that 150. With where we're at capacity wise, we're actually only at like 120 today, which means that we have capacity to add those new clients and build back up to that 150 goal. And that'll probably take us, honestly, 2 to 3 years to do. And that is just a slow growth. We want to be intentional with it. We're not lighting the world on fire, because the other question to ask yourself, do you want what that means? And so if you do have a growth rate of 25% or more, do you want to live the life that goes with that 25% growth rate, which means you're constantly hiring new team members, you're constantly onboarding new clients, and you're cleaning up the mess that goes along with that goal. So for us, and given our season of life and the sake of my marriage, I am not prepared to want what that means at a 25% clip. So for us, like, this is good, this is healthy. It replaces churn. We can achieve all of our goals, both personally and in business, and employ the people that we feel called to.
Make a great place for people to land, right?
Yeah.
So, all right, we have on the screen and a PDF attachment in the handout. So these link directly to our DBA firm free resources, or we'll have a KPI resource coming out tomorrow that just kind of dives a little bit deeper into each of these, or at least has it laid out for you in a document format. You do have the handout from today, so feel free to download it and use it to pull your numbers, see where you land. And then Marcus and Rachel have their Who's Really the Boss podcast. If you haven't subscribed, please do. There is one where all of these numbers were shared, plus more stories than what we went through today, looking at DBA's year-end information. So we do have coming up, we're aiming to share information with all of you at one time a month is really what our goal is here. So we started a team of 3 series, and the next 3 webinars that we have lined up are playing into that series, right? So just getting into the financial advantages of team of 3. What does that really look like? And then roles and responsibilities and implementation and execution. So we shared a lot of numbers, real data here to help you mold your story. So if it helps to hear our story, then that is ultimately what we're after here. So yeah. Marcus will take all the criticism and feedback, even though he says he doesn't want it. Like, please feel free to share.
Bring it on in. So it's one of those where appreciate feedback either way. this is helping us, but hopefully it's also helping you. And this isn't meant to, disparage or discourage anybody. Like, this is just, we've gotten feedback that sharing real numbers, not just theory, is helpful. So that's kind of our goal with all of this. And so we by no means have everything figured out, and we try to be an open book in that. So never think that we're coming at you from any other way. So did we have any good questions, or we just answered everything as we went?
Rachel did a great job of answering questions behind the scenes. So if you do have any additional questions, feel free to fire them through that questions panel. We'll pull them after and make sure we follow up with you. But thank you, Marcus, for today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Rachel, for managing those questions coming in. Do you have any final thoughts to share before we?
Yeah, you asked me that question, like, what would I tell my previous self? And it would be, based on data, make the hard decisions sooner. And so I think we're in a season of that, regardless of what's going on in life. So what's, eat that frog, what's that thing, what's that hard thing that you're avoiding? Go do that and then stop thinking about it, and I think that's just part of life. So I'd encourage you, if maybe something's on your mind, go eat that frog, go get that thing done, and then move on to whatever else there is. And then you're not thinking about that any longer. So, but that's what I would tell myself, is just make the hard decisions sooner based on the data that you've got.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing that, Marcus. Last thing we'll throw at you is software that you're using to track these. Sherry's asking.
Yeah, Excel is good. I think most of this we pull out of QBO. As much as we would love for it to feed into some fancy dancy dashboard, we don't want to invest the time to build that, and then we'll just change it or the connection will break. So for us, we're just pulling it, looking at it through QBO and Excel, saving it, moving forward.
Yeah, awesome. All right, well, thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day. Have a wonderful weekend. Don't work too hard.
All right, see ya.
Bye.